Let's begin with the study and let's go to Zechariah 13. And it says, "In that day a fountain shall be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness." When we read in scriptures in that day, um, it is normally talking about, well, obviously the fulfillment of the prophecy, but prophecies have different forms of fulfillment or different times in which they are fulfilled in a microcosm and then a macro from little fulfillment in, for instance, the time of the prophet, and then that little fulfillment is a small representation of the whole fulfillment of it at the end times. Because as we know, everything that was is what will be, as Shlomo said it and wrote it. So history repeats itself, and so do the prophecies that Yahweh said, but in different ways, in new ways, which is amazing. The way the Almighty can say one thing and fulfill it in different ways without contradicting himself or anything that he said or that is written. So that is the case with this prophecy, for instance, and all prophecies that we see. There is a fulfillment, a small fulfillment. Like, for instance, we are about to enter the feast of Hanukkah, and that fulfillment that happened there, and reason why I mentioned that feast as one that I like to remember during the year with the congregation, is because that whole feast was a representation of the end times, when the beast will appear and set up the abomination of desolation for everybody to worship as the Messiah, being obviously the false Messiah. So, just like it happened in the time of the Maccabees, 150 years um, before Mashiach, like 150 years before Mashiach happened, what we see in the book of the Maccabees, that is what ended up being the feast of Hanukkah, of dedication. When Yahushua came, he said, he mentioned the abomination of desolation for the end times, even though it was written in the book of Maccabees, and obviously he knew about it, that the emperor of Greece, the Greek emperor, set up a sacrifice in the temple of Yahweh and called it the abomination of desolation. Well, not him, the people of Israel called it the abomination of desolation. So to them, that was a fulfillment of what they read in Daniel. It was a small fulfillment of what will happen in the end times. That's why Mashiach mentioned it, the abomination of desolation, even though to the people that were hearing that, to them, that had happened already 150 years before. And even then, some people believed that that was happening or was about to happen some years later after Mashiach died and resurrected, for instance, when the temple was destroyed. So there are several things that have had a fulfillment in history, some type of fulfillment, and I wanted to mention that regarding Hanukkah because we're around that time and because it is a very important fulfillment of prophecy that happened in the past that helps us as an example to understand what will happen in the future and how it will happen and all of that. So I say all of that because every time that we read in scriptures Yahweh telling us in that day, he's talking about the end times mainly, even though there has been other days to represent that day that he's talking about. And as we know, the day of Yahweh, which is the most important day, is the Shabbat. And as Yahweh made the creation in 7 days, so this reality would last seven millenniums. So the last millennium is when Mashiach will rule over the earth, so that those who will be on earth will actually be able to experience what this world would be if it were perfect as it was supposed to be before Adam and Eve ate from the tree. So in that day, means the end times, as it has been a day like that will be in the future, for an example. So, in that day a fountain shall be open for the house of David. It is clear that it's talking about a future time in which Yahweh would set up his son as Mashiach, as we know him as his son. Obviously, the Jewish people rejected him and reject him still. And when I say Jewish, I mean those who are not really Israelites. Because at the end, those who accept Mashiach are the real Israelites. So, in that day, a fountain shall be open for the house of David. Yahushua himself said that he is the fountain of water, of life, and that he who drinks of Mashiach, of his teaching, of his words, will never be thirsty ever again, and he will be able to give that water of life to others so that others don't get thirsty, meaning they receive eternal life. So that is Mashiach Yahushua. Yahweh is talking about the fact that by the end times, Yahweh would have already set up a fountain of water, spiritual water of life, that will clean all of our sins. It's interesting also that water in Hebrew is ma'im, ma'im, and basically the root of that word ma'im is ma, and ma means what, is a question, what. So ma'im is pretty much the plural masculine form of the question what. Water is very well. There are many things that we could talk about regarding water and what it means in the Hebrew and all of that, but my point here regarding this is the fact that through the Ruach HaKodesh given to us by Yahushua HaMashiach, through the Spirit that the Messiah gives us, we are taught all things, as it is written in the letter of the disciple John, the apostle, Yahuchanan. So he wrote that his Spirit teaches us all things and brings to remembrance all things that Yahushua said. So it is through his Spirit, through Yahushua's Spirit, the Spirit of truth, that all our questions are answered. All our what's, all our ma'im. So interestingly enough, Yahushua said he is the ma'im of Chaim, the water of life. Obviously the of, I said it in English, but the water of life. Ma'im, Chaim. So, in that day the fountain, in that day a fountain shall be opened for the house of David. For the house of David. This is important. I have explained before that Yahushua said that he is the, and if there are any questions, please write them on the chat. And if you want me to go deeper into something that I say and you may not understand well, I can explain it better or go into the scriptures and all of that. But there's so much to say that I will try to keep it brief. So, Yahushua asked the Pharisees who Messiah was, and they said that he was the son of David, as people would say nowadays still. Yahushua told them that that was not correct, because David himself called Mashiach a sovereign, called him Adonai, or Adoni in this case, my sovereign. And he said, if David called him sovereign, how can he, the Messiah, be the son of David? Makes no sense, because he's greater than David. And he referred them to Psalm 110, where David, speaking, said, Yahweh spoke to Adoni, to my sovereign, and told him that to sit at his right hand until he would come down and put his enemies at his footstool. my point here is that Yahushua said he is the root of David, and that's why David in Psalm 110 told or spoke and prophesied that Yahweh was speaking to his sovereign. Yahweh was speaking to his Adon. So Yahweh was speaking to somebody else, being that the son Yahushua HaMashiach, and David was giving honor to both of them in the book of Psalm. So Yahushua told the Pharisees that they were wrong, that the Messiah is not the son of David, but the root of David. And after that time, they never wanted to ask him anything else because they were all confused. They didn't understand, I'm sure. That's why they didn't want to ask him anything else. So, and I say that also because nowadays, if you ask anybody, they will also say that he is the son of David, not understanding that Messiah is the root of David and the one that comes at the end of times to become the king, the one that comes through the tribe of Joseph, which is interesting, and I have explained it previously, so I'm not going to get into it. He who comes through the tribe of Joseph, by accepting the sacrifice of Yahushua HaMashiach, who came through the tribe of Yehuda, he will be able to receive the honor to become the branch of David, because he is connected to the root of David. So Yahushua is the root of David because he would start everything, the congregation as the plant. And then at the end, somebody would come from the congregation, accepting Mashiach, the root of David, and then would become the branch of David. So at the end, in the book of Revelation 22, we see that it is until that moment that Mashiach, Yahushua, says that he is both the root and the branch. Because at that time, as it is written in Ezekiel 37, the first and last will become one, the root and the branch. So in this chapter, we are seeing that in that day, the end times, when the Shabbat is starting, pretty much, in that day a fountain shall be open for the house of David. The house of David are the chosen few, the 144,000 of Revelation 7 and 14. Those who accept the true Messiah through the true doctrine that is taught by the witness like Moshe of Revelation 11, who is pretty much, as I just said, the branch of David. There are many titles for, well, both, the first and last. And I guess to explain this better, let's go to Genesis 49. I was trying to avoid it, but it is, I think it's going to help. Genesis 49. In Genesis 49, when we read, worthy to open the book of life that is sealed with 7 seals that will be broken or open during the first 3 years and a half of the end times. Being the first seal, the coming of the witness like Moshe, the messenger of Yahushua, as he himself says it in Revelation 22 when he says that he's sending his malach, his messenger, to testify to the congregations, meaning his representation, basically the second coming through Michael, as we see in Daniel 12, to testify, as Revelation 11, to the congregations, as Revelation 2 and 3. So that is Yahudah, and you guys can read it if you want, but the point here with Zechariah 13 is in verse 22 when he speaks about Joseph, and he starts talking about the second coming through the tribe of Joseph. And he says, Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well. This fruitful bough is basically the fruitful branch. There are some translations that say branch, and well, we know pretty much the same. So Joseph is a fruitful branch, showing how the branch, even though is called by the prophets the branch of David, and is not a contradiction, that branch would come genetically, physically, through Joseph. And we see many confirmations of that through scripture. But here's one of the main ones. He's called the branch. But then later on, we see that the branch is of David. However, David comes from Yehudah. So that doesn't make sense in a fleshy way, or the letter, because the letter kills but the spirit gives life. So when we see it through the spirit of Yahushua, the truth, we understand that in Yahushua there is no Greek and no Yahudi, because we are all one. We are one in Yahushua, and Yahushua is a Yahudi. So even though somebody may come from the tribe of Ephraim as the last, thus he, by accepting Yahushua, is born again spiritually as a Yahudi, and then he becomes the branch of David, even though he was prophesied as the branch of Joseph in Genesis 49, because Joseph received the double mantle, the double portion. Once Reuben made his mistake and committed a sin, and that blessing was taken from him and separated into Levi, who received the priesthood, Yehudah, who received the kingship, and Joseph, who received the firstborn rights of the double portion. So that's why the last comes to become one with the first, while the first is at the right hand of the Father, meaning the Father and the Son in the heavens helping fulfill what it has to be fulfilled through the last. So he has the Father and the Son on the heavens helping him, while Messiah, when he came, had the Father in the heavens. And he himself said that it was good for us that he would go to the Father, because then he would be at the right hand of the Father doing things next to the Father for us. So even though Yahweh is almighty, of course, through Yahushua HaMashiach and his triumph through his sacrifice, he received a portion like that power, just like a son is like the Father. And therefore, there are things that Yahushua himself does for us, obviously because Yahweh wants it. So it was good for Yahushua to go, as he said it in the New Testament, because then, as he said, those that would come at the end would do greater things than what he did. And that would be because he would be at the right hand of the Father. So that's my point. Now, Joseph is a fruitful bow by a well. That well is the one that we are seeing here, the fountain. In that day a fountain shall be opened for the house of David. So this David, we know, is the king of Israel. Yahweh prophesied that he would raise David at the end, and that means the branch of David. So the house of David are the 144,000. David is the father of those 144,000, spiritually speaking. He who taught them the true doctrine. The witness like Moshe, who comes from Ephraim genetically, but through Yahushua becomes the branch of David spiritually. So by becoming the branch of David, he receives a crown, as we see when the first seal is open, to be king and feed the world, just like Joseph fed the world after being a slave, like the prodigal son, and he became the second hand of the Pharaoh and gave food to the whole world. Just like the last will feed spiritually the world through the true doctrine. So the house of David are the 144,000 who will listen to the last, to the witness like Moshe, branch of David. That fountain is Yahushua. That's why in Genesis 49 it says about Joseph that he is a fruitful bow by a well. That well is the fountain, Yahushua HaMashiach. The last needed the first to fulfill his part, for him, the last, to be able to fulfill his. Without the first, the last can do nothing. So, going back to Zechariah, In that day a fountain shall be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. That's why Yahushua cleanses us of our sins through his sacrifice, through our belief in him, through our faith in Yahweh, through Yahushua who died for us. Our sins are taken from us because Yahushua, who never sinned, took them and was sacrificed for us, meaning he received the punishment that we were supposed to receive. So then it says, verse 2, it shall be in that day, it shall be in that day, says Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they shall no longer be remembered. This is a key verse. First of all, from the land, it's talking about Jerusalem and obviously Israel, and we can, since we're talking about the end times, we can even say the whole world, the whole land. So yeah, Yahweh will do this in the whole world, but mainly in Jerusalem, the city of David. It is interesting and very sad that if you go to Israel nowadays, you will find right on the mount where the temple should be, well, pretty much next to it, a bunch of stores selling idols, Christian idols, and well, all types of idols. Mainly those related to the area, of course, but a bunch of idols everywhere. But another key, and maybe the most important thing from this verse, and I hope everybody's listening, paying attention, it says, it shall be in that day, says Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land. He doesn't say, as he does in other parts, that he will cut off the idols. He will destroy the idols. He will do that, of course. But to do that, he's clear here in the way he does it and the way we must do it in our lives, in our hearts, in our vocabulary. Says Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land. Not only the idols, but the names. So any, and I hope everybody's listening, any idol that has a name, that name will be destroyed. And as we know, there is an idol called Jesus. And there's a crucifix, and well, there are all types of ways in which they make that idol, the idol of Jesus. But everybody knows that idol with long hair and white skin and either blue eyes or, yeah, pretty much I think it's mostly blue eyes. And so we know that is not Mashiach. That is not Mashiach at all. It is an idol. And a bunch of people, millions of people around the world, worship this idol. Some people may not have a physical doll or made of wood or of stone or of a metal like we see in scriptures that people would end up worshiping because of their sin. Because of our sin, we would end up doing that, but then Yahweh, because of our repentance and faith in Yahushua, pulled us out of it. So my point is, a lot of people have the idol, other people don't have it, but when they pray, they imagine it. They imagine the same face or the same look that they have seen in a movie or that they have seen promoted by the Catholic Church, for instance. And it is the same thing. If somebody pronounces the name Jesus, that is the image that comes to the head. Because the image, the idol, is the name. And we know that that idol is not Yahushua. And we know that that name is not the name of the Messiah, because he was given one name above every name. So Yahweh is saying here that he will destroy every name. He will get rid of every name that is connected to an idol. That means the name Jehovah, because he has an idol, that of God, will be destroyed. the name Mary will be destroyed because it has an idol. And people who are called Mary and enter the kingdom will receive a new name, as it is written in Revelation, in case somebody's wondering. Jesus will be destroyed for sure. For sure has to be destroyed because he's the main idol. And Buddha and Krishna and every other one. But that's what Yahweh is saying, that he will destroy the names. Why would he destroy the names if the names don't matter, as people say when you tell them about the importance of it? If he knows the heart, why would he have to destroy the names? And if he says that he will destroy the names in that day, why would we not destroy the names in this day from our vocabulary? So that we may not be destroyed in that day when those names are destroyed. Because if we are invoking those names, if we are praising those names as bowing to those idols, then in that day when he will destroy the names of those images, he will destroy those who hold on to those names through the plagues that we see in Revelation. So, it shall be in that day, says Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land. I will cut off the names of the idols. Acherit, I will cut off et shemot, the names of the idols from the land, min haaretz, and they will not be remembered. Velo yisachru. Interesting that we are reading the book of Zechariah, which means he who Yahweh remembers. Zechariah from Zechar. And we see that they, the names of the idols, will not be remembered. Yisachru. And this is being spoken by Zechariah. So is that saying Yahweh will destroy the names of the false images and they will not be remembered. But Yahweh will remember he who invokes his name as ZecharYah, who remembers Yah, and therefore will be remembered by Yahweh. So, then, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they shall no longer be remembered. Just like the world has cut off his name and the name of the Son. Just like it is written in Daniel 9 as a prophecy that Mashiach Nagid would appear on earth and Mashiach would be cut off. So since the world cut Mashiach off, now Yahweh will cut the world off. That's why he who becomes a friend of the world becomes an enemy of Yahweh. So we must be separate from the world and the things of the world so that we may not share the plagues that the world will go through. So, I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to depart from the land. This is very interesting. For many reasons, and I'm not going to get into it very much. But remember that Yahushua said that all who came before him were robbers. All who came before him were basically not coming directly from the Father. They were coming from another entity that Yahweh had allowed to be over this world as Elohim. That's why Yahushua had to come and set everything straight, because everybody through the letter was following a different entity. And that's why they sacrificed Yahushua, because they did not recognize his Father as their Elohim. So what Yahushua came to do was huge. Well, the biggest thing in reality. That was the whole point. And he came to make a way for those who were already lost for being part of this world, which is temporal. He made a way so that we, through our belief in him, using the faith that Yahweh put in us when he created us, that we could become his children, therefore becoming like him, Yahushua. Because our soul, whether through the transformation in the harvest or through death, will get rid of this body and clothe itself with Yahushua's flesh, pretty much. That which will last forever. So, I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to depart from the land. I said all that because it is interesting that in the Old Testament, Yahweh is saying, I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit. Why would he connect the prophets with the unclean spirit? Because unfortunately, most prophets were following an unclean spirit. Just like nowadays, most people, pretty much all who call themselves prophets, are listening to an unclean spirit. We see in the book of Revelation that the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Yahushua. That's why through the spirit of prophecy, the Old Testament was written so that we would understand through the spirit of truth who Yahushua would be, how he would appear and fulfill his mission. So, Yahushua also said, well, in a different book that they took out of scriptures, one of those that they call the Gnostics books, like the book of Thomas, that the spirit of, no, not the spirit, the head of prophecy was cut off when they caught the head of Yahuhanan, the immerser, John the Baptist. When they cut off the head of John the Baptist, they were cutting off the head, meaning the leader or the Elohim or the angel that was over or had control of the spirit of prophecy in this world. So when they cut off the head of John the Baptist, was a sign that Yahushua was taking the role through the spirit of truth, the authority over this world. Obviously for those who believe in him, but for those who do not believe in him, they're still under the authority of the Elohim of this world, which is Satan, as we also know from the words of Yahushua and, well, the whole scriptures. So I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to depart from the land. And that's why, and this is from the book of Zechariah, basically one of the last prophets of the time before Mashiach. The Jewish people believe that for the last 500 years before Mashiach came to the world, and they don't believe in Mashiach, but we know what 500 years I'm talking about. For those 500 years, the spirit of prophecy had left the people of Israel already. They still believe that they don't have the spirit of prophecy. They only have wisdom of the forefathers or the Chachamim, the wise men, not those who went to Yahushua to give him gifts. So, the Jewish people believe that the spirit of prophecy left them during the time of the Second Temple. And we see it here. It was prophesied here. I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to depart from the land. But, and I mean, we see it here as in some of the verses that they would mention in order to say what they claim and believe. But as I was saying, he's talking about, Yahweh is talking about the end times when he will finally get rid of all unclean spirits that are right now in Jerusalem because of all the idols that they are still selling and worshiping, and the false names that they are worshiping, not only there but everywhere in the world, but mainly there because that is the land of Yahweh. So there will come a time when Yahweh will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit that will talk to those prophets to depart from the land. So there will be no prophets. That's why Paul himself said that prophecy will end. Because when we already know everything that had to do with Mashiach, there will be no reason to prophesy. Because the prophecy is the testimony of Mashiach. So when everybody recognizes Mashiach as priest and king, then there's no prophecy. But there will be love and hope and other things that are eternal. And if we have hope, means that we will see new things eternally. It will get better each and every day for eternity. So we cannot even understand how good it will be, because it is then that we will actually know what good is. So it shall come to pass well, I said, yeah, I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to depart from the land. The land. It shall come to pass that if anyone still prophesies, then his father and mother, who begot him, will say to him, you shall not live because you have spoken lies in the name of Yahweh. So if somebody starts saying things that don't go with, and I say that because look how we're saying that it shall come to pass that if anyone still prophesies, then his father and mother who begot him. Meaning, even in the millennium, 1,000 years still, that we need to go through in this world, but in a perfect world, thanks to the Most High. In those 1,000 years, people will have children. And if those children depart from the truth and begin prophesying, they will be cursed. Pretty much what he's saying, in a literal sense. However, we can see it in other ways, as in nowadays, when people, if somebody has an actual prophet as a son, the parents will actually tell them that he's not a prophet, that he's crazy, that he should stop reading the scriptures, that he's going cuckoo. So it's basically what we see nowadays. The real prophets do not claim to be prophets, and mainly one of the reasons, well, obviously the main reason is because of humility. The true prophets are humble, while the other reason is because of what we are reading here. They will get cursed by people who do not understand, because of the fact that for 2,000 years of the apostasy in the supposed congregation of the Almighty, there are many people who have claimed to be prophets, and what they have done is curse the people through lies. Because when those prophecies do not come to fulfillment, people have stopped believing in Yahweh, in scriptures, because they claim that those prophecies that they received them from the Elohim of the scriptures, which obviously they didn't, because they did not come true. And since those people, unfortunately, did not read the scriptures either to see what a true prophet is, they were deceived. And eventually all the people, because of those false prophets, departed from the faith. And that is the apostasy, in a few words. And a lot more, but part of it. So it shall come to pass that if anyone still prophesies, then his father and mother who begot him will say to him, you shall not live because you have spoken lies in the name of Yahweh. And his father and mother who begot him shall thrust him through when he prophesies. Now, as I just said, there is 1,000 years in which people will be able to multiply, and by then the prophecy would have ended, because everything will be fulfilled by that time, as we see in Revelation 10. So, like I also said, for the past 2,000 years, because of the false prophets, now the title prophet is pretty much an insult, because it's like calling somebody a con artist. Unfortunately, and well, sadly, because of the many false prophets and the lack of understanding of society regarding spiritual things or prophets. So that was another way of seeing it. And with this verse that I just read, it's interesting that happened regarding true prophets with Mashiach. He obviously is the head of the congregation of the 5 ministries, of which one is prophecy. So prophecy, I mean, people can still be prophets even though there are so many false prophets. So I want to make that clear, because that comes through the spirit of Yahweh. Also is one of the gifts. Well, not the gifts of the spirit, but yet of the ministry. One of the 5 ministries. And the spirit is connected with the number 5. That's why the letter Hey represents the spirit, represents revelation. That's why there are 5 books in the Torah, what Moshe wrote. And that's why 5 ministries. So, as I was saying, Yahushua lived through this. Even though Miriam gave birth to him while being a virgin, it is amazing what the flesh and time can do through loss of memory and other things, which led Miriam to start paying attention to what the Pharisees were saying and other people were saying, and she thought that perhaps Yahushua had lost it and was crazy, so she went to look for him with her other children that she had at that time already after giving birth to Mashiach, when she actually married Joseph and had children. So they went and looked for Mashiach, as we see in the book of Mark, and they thought he was crazy. And Yahushua said, in that time, because she was acting that way, who is my mother and my brothers, if not those who listen to the will of Yahweh and do the will of Yahweh? So his own mother, thought that he was crazy. The people of his town thought it also. That's why they ended up killing him. Only 12 of his friends actually believed, and of those 12, one betrayed him. So 11. And of those 11, one denied him, and afterwards, thankfully, was able to receive forgiveness. Thomas didn't believe, etc. So even though there were 11 true friends, they still had issues. So we see that this happened with Mashiach. Mashiach started prophesying. And what did they do to him? They thrust him through by sacrificing him on a wooden beam or a cross. So then it says, it shall come to pass that if anyone still prophesies, and this, as Jewish people will agree or even use in the Talmud, this time that Zechariah is talking about the time of Mashiach, which started 2,000 years ago, and it is in the Talmud, yet they don't understand why it started 2,000 years ago, yet Mashiach didn't come to them. So we know that we are in the time of Mashiach, of favor and truth for the past 2,000 years, even though people have rejected it, and therefore the world remains the way it is. But it shall come to pass that if anyone still prophesies, as Mashiach did when he was born, then his father and mother who begot him will say to him, you shall not live because you have spoken lies in the name of Yahweh. Israel and the leaders of Israel betrayed him, rejected him, and killed him. Like father and mother, the leaders and the people, the leaders and the town. Israel, the people of Israel. Then his father and mother who begot him will say to him, you shall not live because you have spoken lies in the name of Yahweh. As Yahushua said, he is the son of the Father Yahweh, he is Mashiach, and they say he was lying. And his father and mother who begot him shall thrust him through with when he prophesies. So then it continues. And it shall be in that day that every prophet, so because of what Yahushua went through, those who are true prophets see his example and realize that if they say the truth, they will be killed. So that's why after this prophet was killed by father and mother as leaders and people, by being thrust through for his prophecies, then it says, and it shall be in that day, remember that for Yahweh 1 day is 1,000 years. It shall be in that day that every prophet will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. Will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. They will not wear a robe of coarse hair to deceive. To deceive. Once again, this confirms Yahweh talking through a prophet, Zechariah, is confirming what Yahushua said, that all those who came before him were robbers. And let me go get that verse. In John 10, verse 7 says, then Yahushua said to them, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers. All who ever came before me, that is talking about Moshe and about all the prophets. And this was amazing that he said this. And it's also amazing that I mentioned it tonight because we also had to mention it in the study yesterday. So, all who ever came before me are thieves and robbers. But the sheep did not hear me. Did not hear them, I'm sorry. But the sheep did not hear them. Pretty much the real sheep were not able to get the truth because the truth had not appeared yet. Most prophets were false prophets, and they were being led by fallen angels, evil spirits, etc. While the true prophets that we see as Zechariah, they were true prophets used by Yahweh, but they were being used by Yahweh through an angel. And that is why that angel, who is not Mashiach, who is not the door, was pretty much like a window or a chimney. So Yahushua said, those who are true enter through the door. And then he said, I am the door. So before the door came, all who came as robbers and thieves because they had to come through a window or through a chimney. And I hope that's being clear. All whoever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. So the good shepherd, the true king, enters through the door, the priest, Yahushua, the first, while all others, false prophets, are robbers and thieves because they have not come through Yahushua. Before Yahushua, there was no door. And after Yahushua, they have been preaching of other entries, which go somewhere else. So, all before Mashiach were thieves and robbers. That's why Zechariah himself is saying, in that day it shall be that every prophet will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. Those who are true prophets will have a feeling of shame because of what people would tell them if they talk about what they saw, what they heard, what they know. They will not wear a robe of coarse hair to deceive. They will not wear the clothing that false prophets wear to deceive, because false prophets know how society works, so they pretty much manipulate the emotions of the people through seeing what they want, what they desire. They kind of say a word for them so that they feel good, and they believe that that's a good prophet because make them feel good. But that's not the case. So those false prophets, they get the whole attire. They know that the people of the world walk by sight, not by faith, while we walk by faith, not by sight. So those who walk by sight, they have false prophets, and those false prophets get dressed very well for the part. Back in the day, a prophet would wear hair. Nowadays, they wear other things, depending on the doctrine or religion in which they are saying or claiming to be a prophet. So the true prophets will not wear what the false prophets wear in order to deceive people, because they wear something that will make people believe, oh, he's a true prophet. Look at what he's wearing. Look how he dresses. Different than everybody else. So they will not wear a robe of coarse hair to deceive. But he will say, I am no prophet. And blessed be the Most High. Because tonight, if you go to Bible Gateway, which is pretty much one of the sites that I use to read scriptures online, because it has many translations. If you go to BibleGateway.com right now, and it's not a commercial because I'm not getting nothing for it, the verse of the day, of today, well, now tonight, says, Yahweh your Elohim will raise up for you a prophet, a prophet like me, Moshe speaking. Yahweh your Elohim will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren, meaning from Ephraim, as I already explained. Him you shall hear, because Yahushua the first is the word, the last is the voice. That's why him you shall hear, because he is the voice. He comes with the voice of an archangel, because he is Michael. The voice of shofar, or trumpet, because he comes to gather the chosen few for the harvest in Revelation 14. So, blessed be the Most High for the confirmation that he gives all the time, that the verse of the day is talking about the prophet that we are seeing here in Zechariah 13. But he, talking in singular, because he's talking about the prophet like Moshe. Because he already spoke about Mashiach coming, prophesying, and being killed for his prophecy. So after that, prophets will be ashamed of being prophets. And then it says about one prophet, the one that was prophesied in Deuteronomy 18, and that I just mentioned, that was the verse of the day. But he will say, I am no prophet. I am a farmer. Why a farmer? Because he's working the land for the harvest. He's planting the seed, which is the word of Yahweh, the name of Yahushua, as we see in the parable mentioned by Mashiach. So the last is coming as a farmer, because he's planting the seed, the word of Yahweh, in people, so that people give fruit, the fruit of the Spirit, fruit of lips that confesses his name, as we see in Hebrews 13:15. He's a farmer because he comes to prepare the world, the land, the earth, for the harvest, to give fruit to Yahweh. Just like when Eliyahu went to get Elishua, when the first came to get the second, when the first came to get the last, he was working the land. But he will say, I am no prophet, I am a farmer. For a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. For a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. Just like Jacob was keeping the cattle of Laban. And we know that Jacob represents the last, just like Yitzhak represents the first. Just like Mashiach was sacrificed by the father, Yitzhak was about to be sacrificed by his father, Abraham, because of Yahweh's request. And that was a test for Yahweh to see if Abraham would have faith and therefore be justified for him to give, basically, through Sarah, give birth to the congregation that would be the family of Mashiach. But he would say, I am no prophet, I am a farmer, for a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. Just like the prodigal son. The story of the prodigal son. He ended up keeping even pigs. A man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one will say to him, what are these wounds between your arms? That is, let me see, because look how they translated wrong so that people don't get it. And this is because of the translation that I'm reading right now. But if we see in the Hebrew, this is verse 6. It says, and he will say to him, what? Ma hamakot. Haile bein yadecha. So he's saying, and he will say to him, what are these wounds between your hands? Not arms, hands. Hands and arms are two different words also in Hebrew. Obviously. Well, it should be obvious. So here, the translator decided to put arms even though it says hands. And this is the type of things that they do in order for people not to be able to realize or see how Yahushua fulfilled the prophecies. Because here it's talking about the second coming. Yahushua, the first coming, as the one who was thrust through by his parents, meaning the parents representing the leaders and the people. And it shall be in that day that every prophet will be ashamed after Mashiach, because of what happened to Mashiach. All the apostles died pretty much like Mashiach, except for Yahuhanan, who went to prison where he got the book of Revelation. They will not wear a robe of coarse hair to deceive. as they used to do and still do. But he will say, I'm no prophet. I am a farmer, for a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one will say to him, what are these wounds between your hands? Meaning, what are these wounds in your hands? It's amazing. Like I was saying, remember when Yahushua died because Yehuda betrayed him, then Keph or Peter denied him, and then Thomas did not believe that he had resurrected, and he himself said, for me to believe, I would have to put my finger in his wounds. And Yahushua appeared and told him, Thomas, come and do it. And he showed him his hands, in which there were wounds that Thomas had to touch in order to believe. So Yahushua came the first time and they killed him by making wounds in his hand when they hang him from the cross. So now, once again I start, Yahushua came, they killed him. Then prophets would begin to be ashamed. And then one prophet would appear who would claim to just be a farmer, just a worker of the land, not a prophet. But then somebody would realize something deeper from him and would ask him directly, if you're not a prophet, what are these wounds in your hands? Why are you wounded? That is to show us, Yahweh through the Spirit of truth, that Yahushua would come and would be killed by being thrust through his hands, as he was. And then the second coming would appear, but he would not claim to be anything, not even a prophet, just a worker of the land. But some would realize his identity through his words and ask him, just like the apostles asked Mashiach if he was Mashiach. And some not even asked him, just told him. So the same right here. And one will say to him, what are these wounds between your hands? Then he will answer. Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Amazing. Because we read in John 1 that, and I will go and read it, verse 10 of John 1, he was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, to his friends, to the house of his friends, Jerusalem. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of Yahweh. This is huge and amazing. I go back, because I already explained part of this earlier. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of Yahweh. And then it says, to those who believe in his name. So who are those who receive the right to become children of Yahweh? Those who believe in the name of Yahushua. Because as we just read in Zechariah 13, all names that are connected to idols, as Jesus is, will be destroyed. Only those who confess the true name, which is above every name, have the right to become children of Yahweh. The authority to become children of Yahweh. To those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, not genetically, not physically, nor of the will of the flesh, not because of man decided to have sex with a woman, nor of the will of men, like I just said, but of Yahweh. It was Yahweh who decided that we come to the truth, the truth, which is Mashiach, so that we may know him as our Father. So, the point here was that he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Where it says to his own, it could also be translated as his people. He came to his people, and his people did not receive him. So that is why in Zechariah 13, when it is speaking about the second coming, somebody asks him, if he is the second coming, the prophet, and he says, I am no prophet, I'm a farmer, etc. I already explained that. And one will say to him, what are those wounds between your hands? Then he will answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends, of my people. So he would be saying that he is the first. This one who is claiming not to be a prophet would be the second coming of he who came, prophesied, and was killed, sacrificed, thrust through his hands. That's why he had wounds in his hands. Now, that does not mean that the second coming will appear with literal wounds in his hand. That will not happen. It is a different body. So he will not have the wounds of the other body of the first, Yahushua, who right now sits at the right hand of the Father. This is talking spiritually about the fact that some people will recognize through his words, through his preaching, who he is because of his soul. Because we speak from the treasure of our heart. So those who listen to the words will be able to know what that heart is, or what is the soul that is in that heart, because the soul is in the blood and the blood goes to the heart. So, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. All right, so then, and when it says my friends, yeah, it actually says my loved ones. In the house of those whom I love. That is amazing. That's why he came and died for us, because he loves us. He came for the 12 tribes of Israel. He was on the cross being sacrificed. Everybody was laughing at him and mocking him and a bunch of other things. And he was still praying for them. Forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Because it was his loved ones who killed him. And as we know, for instance, David means loved one or beloved. Beloved. So it is as saying that he was killed in the house of David, meaning in Jerusalem. And he died for the house of David, the chosen few. And the many also. But those many will have to die because they will not receive the second manifestation, this prophet that we are just mentioning. So then it says, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion. Once again, huge, because it continues to confirm what we are speaking about. As I mentioned in John 10, when I spoke about Yahushua being the door and all those who came before him were robbers and thieves, Yahushua says in verse 11, I am the good shepherd. So Yahushua says, I am the door and the good shepherd, the first and the last. The prophet who would be thrust through his hands, and then the prophet that would not claim to be a prophet in the end times of Zechariah 13. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. That's why the last has to die also, just like the first died. But a hireling, meaning a pastor or shepherd that is hired or paid in order to keep the sheep, who is not the owner of the sheep, who is not Mashiach himself. He who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them, just like it happened with Israel. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I'm known by my own. So those who know Yahweh and therefore accepted Mashiach will know through listening who is the last, the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I'm known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold. He was talking also about those who would come from the Gentiles. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold. That's why in Genesis 49 we see that the branch, the bow of Joseph, goes over the wall. Because it's not only the sheepfold of Israel, but also the sheepfold that he would bring from the Gentiles. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice. The good shepherd, the last, doesn't say my word, it says my voice. And they will hear my voice. And there will be one flock and one shepherd. Why does he have to say one flock and one shepherd? Because there were two. Just like Israel separated of Yahudah, they will become one. Just like Gentiles and Yahudim become one through Yahushua, through their belief in him. And just like first and last, door and good shepherd will become one. That's why it says, and there will be one flock and one shepherd, which is actually prophesied also in Zechariah 14:9. And since we're reading Zechariah, I will say real quick. Zechariah 14:9 says, and Yahweh shall be king over all the earth. Yahushua already came as the priest. Now he has to come the last, Yahweh through the last, as the king. Priest and king. So, and Yahweh shall be king over all the earth. In that day, once again, in that day, Shabbat, the millennium, the end. In that day it shall be Yahweh is one, and his name one. Echad is one in Hebrew. Echad. The numerical value of one in Hebrew, Echad, is 13. That's why Yahushua had 12 disciples. That's why Jacob had 12 tribes. That's why the sun has 12 months, meaning the year. But it is all connected to the sun. So, 13, Echad, 1. So, this is the word 1. Echad. And you see that it has numbers on the top. That is 1 plus 8 plus 4, 13. So, Echad, the numerical value of Echad is 13. And it says there, Yahweh will be Echad, and his name Echad. So, Echad, 13 times 2 is 26, which happens to be the numerical value of Yahweh. Yahweh, Yud Hey Vav Hey, numerical value 26. So 1 plus 1, first and last become 1, and then his name will be 1, 26, because 1 plus 1, 13 plus 13, 26. Not only that, but Echad starts with this letter. This letter is the first letter of the Aleph Bet, or Aleph Tav. And as you see, the numerical value is 1 because it's the first. And it is composed by a Yud on top, a Yud on the bottom, and a Vav across. The Yud has a value of 10. We have 2, then we got 20. And the Vav has a value of 6. So 2 Yuds and 1 Vav gives us a 26. So this letter, which is 1, first letter of Echad, 1, is formed by 3 letters whose values are equal to 26. So this letter represents Yahweh. That's why the first, Yahushua, is the manifestation of Yahweh on earth as his image. He who connects heaven and earth. That's why it's connected like the firmament right here. But not only the firmament, it is a Vav. The Vav connects. That's why it is a nail. The nail that Yahushua, the nails that Yahushua received when he was sacrificed. It represents the Son of Man. That's why the man that was sacrificed being nailed to the cross. So the Vav is a man. That's why number 6, that in the 6th day the man was created, is a nail. That's why in Hebrew the Vav is used as in English the word and, connecting 2 words. First and last. It would be Rishon ve Acharon. First and last. So this is the Aleph. Represents Yahushua, the strength that Yahushua gives us. He who connects heaven and earth through the Vav, the connection, the firmament. 26, 1, etc. So I will continue with Zechariah. So Zechariah 14:9, and Yahweh shall be king over all the earth, and that day shall be Yahweh's one. Why would it say that in that day shall be? Isn't he one since Deuteronomy 6, where it says, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Listen, Israel, Yahweh, our mighty one, Yahweh is one. We need to understand that. That is key. However, he himself said that he would appear on earth twice as two different men through Yehudah and Ephraim. In Isaiah, he says, I am the first and I am the last. That's why he has to say now that in that day he will be one, because he had appeared twice on earth. And that would confuse people to think that he's two, but he's not. He's just one that appeared twice through different vessels, because new wine in new wineskins, old wine in old wineskins. So, also, reason why the book of Bereshit starts with a letter Bet, because creation, Genesis, creation was done, started with the letter Bet, which has the value of 2, because in this creation everything would be separated in twos, because Yahweh remains separate as one. So that's why even when he himself, who is one, would appear on this earth in which there are twos, he would appear twice, as first and last. That's why the prophecy of Zechariah 14:9. Blessings, Bruce. Aliyah says Revelation 16:13 may tie into that somehow. Let me see. Revelation 16:13. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. I'm guessing you're talking about the spirit of prophecy. An unclean spirit will be taken out of the land. Well, it can be connected for the fact that it talks about unclean spirits. And in that sense, those unclean spirits that will come out of the mouth of the false prophet and the beast will finally be taken out of this world at that time. So, in a way, it's connected. Just that's why it's the false prophet. Unclean spirit like frogs out of the mouth of the false prophet. So we see that false prophets are being inspired by specific spirits, which, if we were able to see them in their own reality, had the shape of frogs, because they are well, there are many connections with amphibians or in reptiles, which in Hebrew are pretty much the same. And yeah, frogs are very magical creatures, and when I say magical, I mean that they are used in magic, in witchcraft and stuff like that. It is claimed, according to some books, that in hell there's a part where they are given frogs as food. So, because of that, they say that it is used, or it has a power in witchcraft. So that's why they are connected. Like I have said also, man was created in the image and likeness of the Creator, while all animals were created in the image and likeness of the spirits, angels, and demons. That's why frogs are connected with demons, as we see here. Now, verse 7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd. Cherev, sword. Uri al Roi, against my shepherd. Ve'al gever amiti, and against the man who is my companion, who is with me. Who is with me. This is a prophecy of the death of the 2 witnesses, the good shepherd and his companion, the witness like Eliyahu. Witness like Moshe is the good shepherd. Witness like Eliyahu is his companion. Also, another interpretation, still right, because of what we have read earlier previously. It could be said as first and last, who will then become one. Because of the fact that the word Gever is there, we can connect it to Givor, as Yahweh said that he will come as a Givor. Amiti, with me, as in they will be one, and the word me is in there, which, as I have explained previously, is connected to Yahushua. Me, who, in Hebrew, is me. It is pronounced me when one asks who in Hebrew. And that who in Hebrew is connected to Yahushua the first, just like Ma is connected to the last. So, awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion. So it could be read as Yahushua saying, awake, O sword, against the good shepherd that I sent, who happens to be my companion. Or it can also be said as Yahweh saying, awake, sword, against the two witnesses, my shepherd and he who is the companion, says Yahweh of hosts. So awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion, says Yahweh of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. As we know, this is a prophecy that is mentioned regarding Mashiach, and it was fulfilled in a way. Remember that I always say that what is fulfilled with the first spiritually will be fulfilled physically or literally with the last, and the other way around. So there is a fulfillment that was done with Mashiach through the first of these verses, but not all of it was fulfilled, and perhaps that is part of what is mentioned in that other video that I said that YouTube is putting next to this. So this is mainly going to be fulfilled in the end. Why? Because Yahushua is the door. The end, the last at the end is the good shepherd. So Yahushua as the door fulfills certain things to allow us to understand what will happen with the last, who is the shepherd. So says Yahweh of hosts, strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. When Yahushua was taken to be killed, his disciples scattered. And that's how it was fulfilled at that time, in that moment. In this time, it's talking about how when the beast kills the good shepherd, the witness like Moshe, the 144,000 will know that it is the time for the second Exodus, so they will scatter to the mountains for the harvest to happen, as Yahushua said, and we see in Revelation 14. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. Then I will turn my hand against the little ones. Then I will turn my hand against the little ones. Let me see how that ends in Hebrew. It says against. It could be translated against, but it could be translated as above or over, as in protection. We know that Yahushua is the hand. Yahushua is the arm. The last is the hand. Arm and hand as one. Zechariah 14:9. They will be one, but at this time they separated in two manifestations. So the fact that it says strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered, like I said, witness like Moshe will be killed, and then the 144,000 will be scattered, just like Israel itself was scattered throughout the earth because of their sins, and also because of killing Mashiach. They will scatter a little bit more after him. And the sheep will be scattered. Then I will turn my hand over the little ones. As in saying, when the hand dies and resurrects, he will turn to gather the chosen few, the little ones, to protect them, as we see in Revelation 12, in the prepared place for 1,260 days. Verse 8. And it shall come to pass in all the land, says Yahweh. And it shall come to pass in all the land, says Yahweh, that 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die. 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die. In the book of Daniel, we see something in a very clear way that we see all over scriptures, but I like to use as an example the book of Daniel. We see Daniel had 3 friends. There were 4 of them. 4 representing the 4 corners of the earth where his sheep were scattered. The 4 corners of the earth, the 4 letters of the name Yahweh, the 4 levels of creation, the 4 levels of interpretation. So 4 friends in the book of Daniel. Daniel was over them in authority and knowledge and wisdom, in faith and other things, even though they were men of faith, the other 3. Daniel, as one, represents the chosen few who are one with Yahushua. The chosen few are represented as one person because they are the body of Yahushua, who is one. with the Father, who is one. Then the three friends represent the many. Not two, not four, three. The three represents many. There's actually a saying regarding that. But one, Daniel, is the chosen few, 144,000, Revelation 7 and 14, as the wheat in the harvest. The three friends of Daniel in the book of Daniel represent the many who will have to go through the great tribulation, as we see in Revelation 7 also. The multitude who goes through the great tribulation and dies, just like they had to be thrown in the fire. But they were guarded by Yahweh, meaning even though they will die in the great tribulation, Yahweh will resurrect them and justify them because of their testimony in their heart, as Romans 10:10 says. So the three friends represent the many. The one, Daniel, represents the few. That's why when the three are thrown in the fire, Daniel does not appear at all in that chapter. Why? Because he represents the fact that the few will be already in the prepared place, being protected, when the many will be thrown in the fire. We see in Revelation 14, they are the grapes that are thrown in the winepress of the wrath of, and because of their death is that the nations will be punished through the 7 last plagues, or the bowls of wrath. Those bowls of wrath are filled with the blood or the wine that came out of the winepress of the wrath of Yahweh. So it shall come to pass in the land, says Yahweh, that 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die, but 1/3 shall be left in it. 1/3. 1/3. Why 2/3 die, 1/3 stays? Once again, the third or three is connected with the many. But also remember that Lucifer fell with 1/3 of the angels. 1/3 of the angels. So pretty much Yahweh needs 1/3 to fill up that third that fell. So that is a way of seeing this, for instance. So that 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die. There are 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls of wrath. During the 7 seals, Yahweh destroys a fourth part of what is in the world, because there are 4 corners in the earth. Then during the 7 trumpets, Yahweh brings judgment against a third part of everything, because of the third part of angels that fell with Lucifer, like it will happen in this time that we're seeing here. After that comes the plagues, the last plagues, the bowls of wrath, in which Yahweh will punish all that is left. So first 1/4, then 1/3, and then all. It shall come to pass in all the land, says Yahweh, that 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die, but 1/3 shall be left in it. I will bring the 1/3 through the fire. Blessed be the Most High. As I just said, the 3 friends of Daniel went through the fire. Daniel was nowhere around because he is represents the chosen few. The 1/3, as the 3 friends of Daniel, will go through the fire, meaning they will have to die also. But then they will be resurrected and be part of the kingdom of Yahweh as the many. That 2/3 in it shall be cut off and die, but 1/3 shall be left in it. I will bring the 1/3 through the fire. The last is the consuming fire. Through the fire, Yahushua is the water in which we were immersed to become one with the Father and be born again. The last is the immersion of fire. John the Baptist said that he immersed in water, Mashiach in the Spirit as the water of life, and then the last in the fire. So, I will bring the 1/3 through the fire, will refine them as silver is refined, like the many, like silver. Let's go to Malachi. In Malachi 3, I read quick, says, Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. That is John the Baptist. The immersion of water. And the sovereign whom you seek, that is Mashiach, will suddenly come to his people. While he was immersing the people in the Yarden, John the Baptist, suddenly came Mashiach. And John the Baptist said, that is the Lamb that takes the sin of the world. So, and the sovereign whom you seek, because everybody was seeking shalom with the Father, peace, life, forgiveness of sins, will suddenly come to his people. Even the messenger of the covenant. Since first and last are one, the word here is even, because he is both, but in two different times. That's why also the word even. Not only he will come, but even the last. Even the messenger of the covenant. Yahushua came to make a covenant, a new covenant. The last is his messenger, as I just mentioned in Revelation 22. Yahushua said, I send my messenger to testify to the congregations. So Yahushua is the sovereign whom the world seeks, who suddenly came to his temple when the spirit entered a body in Miriam. Came to his temple, the body of Mashiach, who is the temple. Even the messenger sent by Mashiach, according to Revelation 22, even the messenger of the covenant, who in Daniel 9 confirms the covenant. And I just posted that article regarding the prince that is to come, according to Daniel 9:26. That article I wrote a long time ago, but I just posted it again because I just started fixing the site once again. So it's already there, but it may not be that easy to find. And I actually just posted it in Spanish, so I need to post it in English so that you guys can read it. I believe it's very interesting and sets a lot of things in order. So anyways, the last comes to confirm the covenant that Yahushua made through his blood, because Yahushua raised the cup and said, this is the blood of the new covenant. So, and it says, will suddenly come to his temple, meaning Mashiach, even the messenger, the Malach, Mikael, of the covenant, who confirms the covenant, in whom you delight, because he brings the reward. Behold, he is coming, says Yahweh of hosts. But who can endure the day of his coming? Through this verse, we see that the last that he mentioned refers to the last, the witness like Moshe, who is the fire, because Yahushua is the water, and he came to bring forgiveness of sins. So Yahushua is the sovereign whom everybody is seeking, will suddenly come to his temple, that is Mashiach. Even 2,000 years later, the messenger of the covenant, to confirm the covenant, in whom you delight, who will bring shalom. Behold, he is coming, says Yahweh of hosts. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? Everybody was able to stand when Yahushua appeared, because he was bringing forgiveness. They didn't accept him. For he is like refiner's fire. So he's talking, this time, Malachi, about the second coming, who is like refiner's fire. That's why we just saw here in Zechariah that he said, I will bring the 1/3 through the fire, will refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. So Yahweh will test the few through the preaching of the last, who is the consuming fire. And the others will be also tested, but actually refined through their death for not accepting, for failing the test basically. But then will be refined as silver. The few are gold, who are tested, immersed in fire, and become gold, well, appear as gold. The many are silver, who will have to be refined through death. So Malachi, but who can endure the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire. This is connected to Zechariah 13. And like launderer's soap, he will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Same thing. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, of the many. In Zechariah 13:9, will refine them as silver is refined through the fire. He will, back in Malachi, he will purify the sons of Levi Levi was also a name of Moshe. So we could see this as he will purify the sons of Moshe, because he comes as the witness like Moshe for the 144,000, and purge them as gold and silver, and that they may offer to Yahweh an offering in righteousness, as we see Hebrew 13:15, through the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, by invoking the name of Yahweh. So it's talking about the second coming. And I finish Zechariah 13 verse 9. I will bring them the 1/3 through the fire, will refine them as silver is refined, that is the many through death, and test them as gold is tested, the few. They will call on my name. They will call on my name. Those who are the few are tested. They call on his name, Yahweh, through Yahushua, and are saved. Those who do not call are refined through death, and then when they are resurrected, they will call on his name, as we see in Revelation 7. That exact thing happens there. They are resurrected and they start calling on his name. So they will call on my name. That's why the whole chapter started with, I will destroy the names of idols. The names that people are worshiping nowadays, I will destroy them. And then they will call on my name. That's why it's so important to call on the real name of Yahweh, not on Hashem, because that is actually just a name, the name, but on his name that he gave himself when speaking to Moshe. Well, obviously he did it previously, but revealed it to us through Moshe. So they will call on my name. They will call on my name, because the good shepherd will preach of his name, just like Yahushua did 2,000 years ago. They will call on my name. That is a prophecy that people avoid to fulfill, even though they can all be part of. Everybody can be part of the fulfillment of this prophecy, but nobody wants to, because they believe it's not important. It's just fanatism, or it's just, they have many names for it. And they just don't want to accept it, even though it's prophecy. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. Meaning that right now, since they are calling to other names, he's not answering them. There are other spirits who are answering. And sometimes, obviously, because of their faith, because their lack of understanding, Yahweh is good and he answers prayers, yet people still give credit to other entities or idols. So they will call on my name and I will answer them. I will say, this is my people, as it was prophesied in the book of Hosea. This is my people. And each one will say, Yahweh is my Elohim. Vehu Yomar Yahweh Elohei. And he will say, Yahweh is my Elohim. Yahweh Elohei. Hope that's clear. So finally, at that time, everybody will accept the real name and worship the real name, worship the real mighty one through the name. Well, some of you tomorrow in the Des Programa in Spanish. And I'll see the rest next week over here. So may the Almighty bless you. And by the way, next week you will be able to enter also through the site thewayofyahweh.org